This is our final session of the day. Maybe we should call it the finale, the grand finale. We have a really special group of astronaut scholars assembled who are all working in aerospace. And we have a fabulous, once the cocktail challenge champion. Once he was.
Whoa. Two years in a row.
2 years in a row. 2 years in a row. He won't let us forget that. So he'll be back with vengeance next year. So if he starts making you mix drinks while you're up here, don't be surprised. But thank you so much. We're going to turn it over to Scott Altman to moderate this panel. Thank you all for joining us. And we have a lot of scholars in the room. We're really excited to have you all with us today. All this weekend is celebrating our inductees, but everything we do benefits you guys and the scholars that come after you. So we are very, very proud of you. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
All right, well, thank you very much, Caroline. I appreciate that. And thanks for mentioning the cocktail championships that I had. I'm not even going to go there now. Fergie won last night, and I didn't compete against him, so there you go. But I am excited to be here. And I know we have astronaut scholars in the crowd, too, so I just want to lay the ground rules for you all right now. Heckling is allowed. You just have to be smart heckling. So it has to demonstrate the quality of an astronaut scholar, not, bogus low-grade heckling. So, all right, so we got an impressive group of folks up here, in addition to those of you in the audience. As Kurt said, I am clearly not the smartest person on the panel that everyone else is. He did say that, yes. That's like pre-show heckling. I appreciate that. So it gets everything off on the right foot. But what I'd like to do is have each scholar run down and give us a minute or two about themselves. Then I'll ask some questions, and then maybe ask some questions of the group. But also, if somebody wants to interrupt and put their hand up, you can ask questions. Doesn't have to be heckling, but it is, encouraged to have like a roast. So, all right. Well, I lined them up in the way that my notes were, so I've got Ruth to kick it off.
Hello, my name is Ruth Nichols. I am a 2022 astronaut scholar. I go to Florida Institute of Technology, which is just 30 minutes from here. So I love the weather here. I study astrobiology and mathematical sciences. I'll be graduating next year. I'm involved with 3 different research labs where I study astrobiology, quantum biology, and biomathematics. So I'm really busy. And so this summer, actually tomorrow, I'm flying to North Dakota for an analog astronaut mission where I'll simulate being an astronaut for 2 weeks. So that's really exciting. And then after that, I'm going to go to DC for an internship in space policy. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. My name is Terrell Cadd, and I am a 2021 astronaut scholar from Virginia Tech. I'm actually a non-traditional student, so I actually worked at UPS for 8 years before I ended up getting my first engineering internship. Started off with NASA, and that was right before I got to my transfer to Virginia Tech from community college. And after that, I got multiple other NASA internships where I've had a chance to work on rovers, wildland firefighting technology, and stuff like that. And recently I graduated from Virginia Tech, and now I'm on my way to MIT. So I'm starting there for the Aero Astro program. And currently, Dr. Jeff Hoffman, who is not here yet, or not here today, but he's in Antarctica, I think. He's doing a test, but he's an amazing person. But right now I'm at Sierra Space, working on the next iteration of the space station, so that's awesome. But yeah, really liking everything I'm doing right now. It's been a wild ride.
Hello, everybody. My name's Nathan Hadland. I received the Astronaut Scholarship in 2018 and 2019. Currently, or during that time, I was doing my undergrad at Florida Institute of Technology as well, studying astrobiology and doing some work on Mars analogs and Mars regolith remediation. But now I'm doing my PhD at the Lunar and Planetary Laboratory at the University of Arizona. So studying planetary sciences, specifically I use volcanic processes in Iceland as an analog for Mars. And we also study the types of biosignatures, so the signs of life that you expect in these really harsh conditions, and how we can use those techniques to potentially detect life on Mars's surface as well. So I do a lot of field work. I'm really passionate about going out in the field and studying extreme environments. So yeah, also a few weeks ago, I just passed my PhD qualifying exam, and yeah, thank you. And so I spent 3 or 4 hours in a room with my committee being heckled by them and roasted, so bring it on. I have plenty of practice.
That's awesome. All right, I'm Jared Jordan. I'm a 2022 Astronaut Scholar. Graduate Monday from aerospace engineering at Embry-Riddle. My work has been a combination of research and different projects. I actually work with Grace on a few things, a few different commercial companies, one for Intuitive Machines. I'm working on one for SpaceX Polaris Dawn at the moment. That'll be the first commercial EVA. Really excited to be here, ready for the talk.
Hey folks, my name's Grace Robertson. I am a 2021 Astronaut Scholar from Embry-Riddle. Jared and I have spent too many hours together. We did share a lab when I was an undergrad. And after that, I'm now a grad student at CU Boulder studying bioastronautics, specifically bioregenerative life support systems, and getting my flight controller certification at Sierra Space.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Wilson Turner. I'm a senior at the University of Chicago studying molecular engineering and chemistry. Right now, I work on sustainable polymers and materials related to sustainability for water filtration as well as next generation energy materials. But after graduating, I'm going to be kind of taking a diverting path and working at SpaceX as a launch engineer, where I'll be studying their fuel generation and figuring out how we can make methane fuel on Mars.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mitch Wall. I am currently a PhD student at the University of Colorado Boulder. My lab does like hypersonics and computational fluid dynamics, and I'm working on modeling things like reaction control thrusters or retropropulsion jets in fluid dynamics. I originally was a 2019-2020 astronaut scholar when I was studying engineering mechanics and aerospace engineering at the University of Wisconsin. And that's me. So.
All right, great. So each one of them got their name right. So clearly we have an impressive group going down. No one forgot. And some good schools that you guys talked about, although I know MIT probably couldn't get into Illinois, so you had a safety school to go back to. So, and unfortunately for me, no one from Purdue up here. So that's one of my pet peeves. So thanks. But Ruth, I'm interested, you're headed to DC this summer as an intern, and you've studied the probability of life. Do you think that humans have been too arrogant as we look at how life would develop? And I think about the lunar missions where we put people in a little cabin thing on the aircraft carrier. What gave us confidence that that would stop some sort of extraterrestrial life from penetrating those barriers? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I do think that we have been really ignorant with our search for life, that we kind of define it based on what Earth is like, what life is like on Earth, which can help us guide us, help us find life, but that can also misguide us and cause us to lose track and be distracted. So I do think that astrobiology is a growing field right now, and there's a lot going on and a lot of potential for more research to be done. So there is a lot of work into looking into exotic life or life as we don't know it. So that's my answer, yeah.
Very good. Yeah, Star Trek really didn't imagine things being too different, but that's my background in the search for life out there. Terrell, Virginia Tech, great school, and internship at Langley. How did that prepare you for your studies and desires to do more?
So my first internship at Langley was in 2019. That was when I was coming initially out of a community college. And leading up to that point, I never thought that I could even be an engineer. And because when I actually got that opportunity, it kind of brought everything to life. You know, it gave me the confidence that I needed. And like my first internship at Langley, I took every opportunity I could to stand out while I was there. So that initial internship opened up the doors to so many other things. Like for instance, the Astronaut Scholarship. I used the internships that I did there to, talk about the research that I did for the application for the actual Astronaut Scholarship itself. So without that initial internship, I wouldn't have the confidence that I do now to do the public speaking like I do nowadays, to mentor other people, to really try to make a difference like I've always wanted to. So the initial internship at Langley did just that. It gave me the confidence that I needed to go forward and gave me that motivation to really try as hard as I could, because you never know what you're capable of until you really step outside of your comfort zone, and they definitely pushed me to do that, and I really do appreciate that.
All right, yeah, great answer, and we're going to come back to some of that, those thoughts about STEM and the next generation. So, Nathan, so astrobiology and looking at Iceland for life on Mars. What do you think are the analogs that help you see that could work?
Yeah, so Mars is a cold, dry desert planet. It is extremely hostile. There's very little atmosphere, and compositionally it's extremely different than Earth, obviously. Mars doesn't have a magnetic field, so it's bombarded by highly ionizing radiation. So it's an extremely difficult environment for life to survive. So there's no great analog on Earth, because any system that we look at on Earth is going to be in the optimistic end member in terms of habitability and the types of conditions that we would expect. Even in Mars's distant past, Mars used to be much more habitable, but it wasn't habitable for very long. It became, the cold and dry desert planet that we know of it today around 3.8 billion years ago. So it wasn't habitable for very long. So, but that brings me to why Iceland's a great analog. And Iceland is also cold, not as cold as Mars, but it is also fairly pristine. So a lot of the processes that we're trying to understand in terms of extreme life in untouched ecosystems, this is a great environment to look at. Mars has these flood basalt fissure styles of eruptions, and we also see that style of eruption occurring on a fairly regular basis on Iceland as well. And because of all these really extreme conditions, Iceland is extremely low biomass in terms of the types of microbes that occupy those rocks, those lava rocks. And so if we can't detect life in that type of ecosystem where it's this optimistic end member in terms of habitability, we have no hope of detecting biosignatures on Mars. So we need to refine our techniques and where we should be looking for biosignatures using Earth as an analog. So, yeah.
So do you think there's any chance we could terraform Mars eventually?
Yeah, I mean, earlier today in the talk, we kind of had a brief conversation about that, but Mars is too small to lose its atmosphere too quickly, so I do not think so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jared, you have some exciting things coming up soon. I know you've been working on the Eagle Cam and a lander with Intuitive Machines out of Houston. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was a project started in 2019. Steve Ultimus is an alum of Embry-Riddle, and he started Intuitive Machines. They have the Nova Sea lander, which is slated to go to the moon based on the CLIPS initiative. So it was kind of a challenge to us, to our school, and then my lab director of the Space Technologies Lab, Troy Henderson. We got that bid, and we were given the project. So its mission is to basically take a third-person view of a lunar landing. All of the footage that we have of lunar landings is from kind of the first-person point of view, where we're kind of looking at it and everything else is happening. We have Eagle Cam mounted to the Nova Sea, so it's coming down, but then we shoot off, and we're looking back at it to take pictures as it's landing. There's obviously PR benefits to that, right? We get to see it landing, but there's also a lot of cool effects that we can see. One of these is plume, so the dust on the moon, like Mars, there is no atmosphere, and everything actually gets charged because of it. It can't dissipate. So seeing how those particles react when you have now a rocket jet plume landing and how that's dispersing, how that's getting on your own equipment as you're landing, is that affecting your engine performance, that type of stuff. So there's also the scientific aspect as well of taking those pictures as it's landing. So a lot of cool stuff happening with that mission.
Oh, very great. Now, you're also looking at nuclear thermal propulsion as well, which I think could be key towards actually making travel to places like Mars more reasonable, let's say. Any thoughts on the development of that?
I think it's exciting. I know with all the new commercial companies, we're progressing very quickly and getting reusability of chemical rockets very well. As far as the more advanced types of propulsion, whenever you say nuclear, people kind of have it has a connotation, right? So getting past that mindset and getting more education out there of nuclear does not just mean bombs. Getting past some of that red tape is going to be fundamental to getting newer technologies and more human space flight farther out. So that's the main hurdle I see with that.
Yep, agreed. All right, Grace, really enjoyed your talk to the board this morning. Thank you for sharing. I know you're with Sierra Space right now, very interested in becoming a flight controller. I also work in bioastronautics. So what do you think we need to do in order to enable long-duration space flight and humans to live and eat for those long periods of time?
Yeah, so the conversation around long-duration missions and life support systems really turns to the concept of a bioregenerative life support system, one in which we are able to not only create our own food to support the nutrition of the astronauts, since they are typically nutritionally on a deficit throughout the duration of their mission due to operational stresses, due to palatability of the food, among many other things. So being able to grow our own food on orbit for long-duration missions will support astronauts nutritionally, acting thus as a countermeasure for physiological and psychological effects of long-term missions. But that also plays into how does that go into our CO2 scrubbing and our O2 regeneration abilities. That also looks at, okay, well, what do we do with our water systems? How does this play into the bigger picture of how we keep humans inside a very large spacecraft alive over a long period of time? And can we really create a little ecosystem inside that spacecraft that's going to keep them alive, that will keep itself alive, while also mitigating things like microbes, right? We have a lot of different things to consider with a bioregenerative system that has plants in space. There's a microbiome in soil, and when you take that to space, that might look very different in how that propagates across the entire spacecraft. So the biggest thing to keep people alive in long duration missions is really the notion of that bioregenerative system.
And then with Dream Chaser about to make its first operational flight, hopefully later this year, I think, are you looking at the crew version of that? Is that something you would like to explore or fly on?
Yeah, so right now, as it stands, we're about approximately, not from this exact date, but about 8 weeks out from when we ship this thing out of Colorado and send it for fully integrated acceptance testing and go through that entire test regime. So to say, we're on the biggest grind that there is of this part of of what we are trying to do. DC 200, which is what we are now coining the crewed mission, Sierra Space, that was the original design, right? So we've had this design set for a number of years. Sierra lost the crew contract. They won the cargo contract. So they pivoted to be able to deliver a cargo vehicle to meet the CRS-2 contract. Now, since we have that DC 200 design, the crewed design, in our bank, we're working on refining that and are in parts purchasing processes to try and get the inventory we need, turn around the factory on the production floor to be able to pivot to build that much larger vehicle, get the ground support equipment we need, and turn it out to really support that mission. Right now, that would look like we have to have somewhere to go, right? So something like what Terrell mentioned, he's working on the orbital reef side of things for the space station that Sierra is partnering with Blue on. So until we have somewhere to go or we end up with a contract with NASA to take that to ISS, we're going to be deep in development on that. And I think the path forward is continuing to deliver successful cargo missions.
Well, I wish you a lot of luck with that. As a former shuttle astronaut, I like the idea of landing on a runway instead of in an ocean or a desert. But I know Boeing, at least you're landing on land, right? So kudos. All right, thanks, Grace. Wilson, so you're looking at Mars and in situ resource utilization. Is that going to work, I guess? Well, how do you bet on that when you're an astronaut headed there and you're like, hey, I don't have enough fuel to come home, but I'm sure we'll be able to make it on the surface?
I think in situ resource utilization, or ISRU, is essentially the only way to go for a lot of things that we need. For example, we can't bring canisters of oxygen as our way to breathe the entire time there for long-term Mars habitation. And I think ISRU holds a lot of promise. There's actually already been a lot of great work done with the MOXIE program coming out of MIT on the Perseverance rover, which has successfully proven that they can pretty quickly and efficiently convert carbon dioxide into breathable oxygen. I think that's just the very first step, but there's a lot of really interesting chemistry that can be done, speaking as a chemist, as an engineer. I think the way that we're going to move forward on Mars with fuel generation is through a reaction called the Sabatier reaction, which is actually fairly straightforward. It's a high temperature process between carbon dioxide and hydrogen. If you put them together at high enough pressure and concentration, what you get out is methane, or natural gas. Coincidentally, actually not coincidentally, the fuel of choice for Starship, which I'll be working on, is methane for that reason. The idea being it's powerful, it's much safer than a lot of the fuels that were typically used by NASA prior to hydrogen, with the hydrazines and other things that are exceptionally toxic. And it's ubiquitous. It's what we use on our gas-fired ranges, as well as what we'll be using in our Starships of the future. So I'm really excited about our ISRU's potential and how far it will go in aiding us to get to Mars.
Good. And I think you're headed to SpaceX or working with SpaceX right now, is that correct?
I graduate in a month, and then I'll be working with SpaceX full-time.
Okay. All right. And our final panelist, Mitch, congratulations on coming out of the Midwest, University of Wisconsin.
Thank God.
Okay, don't blow it now. But Colorado's a great state too, but hypersonics, how do you see that being part of a startup company that you'd like to work for, going right into hypersonics?
Yeah, I think if you asked me that question like 20 years ago or even 10 years ago or something, it wouldn't make any sense at all. But right now there's a really interesting and rich environment of startups in the aerospace industry, whereas before, it'd be dominated by like the Boeings and the Lockheeds and everything like that. But I've seen through like my internships at SpaceX is not really like a startup anymore, but at places like Relativity Space or interactions through ATA, a consulting company, that there's a really strong environment of people just like demonstrating that there's a need for a thing and being able to execute on it. Luckily, today, hypersonics is like also one of the biggest buzzwords ever. So if you wanted to start a hypersonic startup, now would probably be the time to do it. And that was definitely one of the motivations for pursuing a PhD, is a lot of people think like going into a PhD, you're gonna like stay in the academy forever and things like that. But being an expert in one of those fields is really kind of sets you up to be one of the people that can identify the major problems and can like sell it to people. So
great. Well, we'll start at your end to come back, and this is a question kind of for the group. As examples of what can be done and really superior performance, how do you look back at who's coming behind you and inspire that next generation to follow in your footsteps now that you're that example? I'd like to hear from each one of you with your thoughts on that.
Well, I think if I'm thinking of like motivating somebody to go into aerospace or to work on like space exploration or something like that, I think the job is pretty easy, honestly, especially right now. Like again, like I think this answer would be different like 10 or 20 years ago. But there's a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different people that want to work in different environments. There's like startup opportunities now, and there's like more like traditional opportunities and everything. So and plus there's just like every couple of years there's like a first flight of a rocket, which is like the stuff that I'm interested in now. So I think now is definitely the time to start.
Okay.
Yeah, this question really hits home for me because I work with an educational nonprofit on the south side of Chicago, specifically for science outreach. And I think that kind of bringing that excitement that science and the possibility of exploration has for kids who are much younger is essential. And not to make them astronauts. Very few kids who grow up wanting to become astronauts. but instead they become engineers and doctors and mathematicians and the base of our STEM workforce, because they're interested in science and math, and it makes them study it. And I think that's kind of almost the most important goal of NASA, is to build that group of engineers and the next intellectual kind of bread and butter of America. I know that I wanted to become an astronaut because I read Carl Sagan growing up, and I have my mom to thank for that, but not everyone has someone who will put Carl Sagan in front of you. So that's something that's very important to me. I think that we all have a responsibility to do as astronaut scholars.
Well, I read Isaac Asimov and iRobot, and now we got ChatGPT. So you see where that inspired.
And now it writes raps for us.
Yeah. Not good ones, but sorry for. Grace, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so surrounding this topic, I think a lot of times the conversation dwells on how do we get more high schoolers to pursue a STEM degree. But I think as a society, we should refocus the conversation of how do we show little kids that they can do it. Because that is the age that you are most impressionable, and that is also usually the age that you're not afraid to say, I do want to go to space, or I do want to become a crazy surgeon or a firefighter, or whatever little kid thing you dream of. But so many times, adults in your life are standing up, looking down at you, saying, that's kind of hard, are you sure? And so I think a lot of times we should be refocusing the conversation from how do we get high schoolers to STEM degrees, from encouraging little kids to say, yeah, that is really cool. How do we help you get there? Can we find you a library book? Can we show you something to really feed into that? And I think that's something I've gotten to explore more of since I've graduated out of my undergraduate program. I've started to step up and speak more toward elementary schools and middle schools and talking about all the cool things. And like some of the other folks have shared so far, we're at a really cool, fun, exciting time in the space industry where we have a lot to show for. And I think that in and of itself will feed into a generation of kids wanting to grow up, not only working in space, but becoming doctors and becoming people that are going to make really big changes. And I think it also takes being an example and showing them that there is someone that looks like them on the other side of it that is doing it, that they can grow up to be too.
Great.
And I would definitely agree. Like the overemphasis on like, oh, it's too hard. I mean, if it's gonna be cool and if it's gonna make an impact and it's gonna challenge you, it's probably gonna be hard, and that's a good thing, right? You'll grow through that. But other than that, the STEM outreach type of deal is important, because I actually grew up when I was real tiny. I would do like little STEM competitions, and I was on a little team. We would actually, I don't know if you know FGCU, Florida Gulf Coast University. It's down on the West Coast. They would sometimes put on STEM tournaments, and you'd have like your team of nerds, and you'd go out there and you would do like these different challenges, like egg drop challenge, like don't drop the egg, but pack it in nicely, teach you about energy dissipation and just the basics of physics. Just doing events like that, I mean, if those hadn't have been around, I wouldn't have had the exposure to engineering and problem solving and critical thinking that I did. I mean, you can be as self-motivated as you can be, but you need the exposure and opportunity to do those things, right? So having that combination, that outlet for those younger kids that have that drive already, giving them something to do with their mind is vital for them succeeding and becoming those leaders.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what everybody said so far. I guess coming more from like the scientist perspective and being in a PhD right now, I'll preface my answer by saying like definitely academia and research and doing a PhD is not for everybody, and that's what I usually talk when I talk to undergrads, and that's usually what I preface my answer with. But that being said, in what other scenario do you get to research exactly what you're interested in and pursue the questions that really tickle your fancy and that have been like bothering you for however long? And yeah, for me, like I'm really lucky for the opportunities that I've had, and what other job and what other scenario do I get to stand in front of a flowing lava river and study erupting volcanoes and see that those sorts of things firsthand and pursue those types of questions. And I even cooked my lunch one time that it was hot dogs on the surface of the lava flow. Like I got to do that for work. Like, I mean, it can't be all bad. So Yeah, so that's usually what I talk about is like, research is one of the most pure science that you can do because you can investigate the types of things that you're interested in. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll kind of echo what Grace said a little bit ago in regards to someone telling you that you're not capable, or not necessarily capable, but are you sure you want to do that? Because when I had started my initial engineering path, people kind of looked at me like I was crazy because I wasn't the best student in high school. I didn't have the engineering background. I didn't know anybody in engineering to begin with. But so like having someone say, are you sure that you want to do that when you're already trying to do something that's very difficult for you, it makes it that much harder. So something that I try to do is, tell people who have certain goals that they think they're just completely unachievable, that their goals aren't crazy. I thought my goals were crazy, and then all of a sudden I was at NASA, and I came back to NASA, and I kept on doing all these crazy things that I never thought I could even be capable of being a part of. So I think what Grace was saying earlier is 100% true. There's a lot of people who think that they're not able to get into the STEM environment, no matter what age range. For me, I was a little bit older when I actually got into the STEM environment. So my goal is to show people who come from a background where, engineering doesn't seem possible. Nobody in their family is an engineer. Nobody that they know is an engineer. I want to show them that, you can do whatever you want to do. You just got to, put your mind to it, step outside of your comfort zone, and maybe you might have to be the first person in your family to do something. But that's not impossible, so I think it's very important.
Yeah, I really relate to that. I'm kind of the only science math major in my entire family, and I wish that when I was younger I'd had a guide or a mentor to support me, to encourage me to pursue STEM or give me guidance. So I kind of wish to serve as that person for others, especially as an astronaut scholar, and to show people that they can do this even if they're from my background or other backgrounds. And it's so important to do that so we get more people in STEM, because we need those different perspectives, those different backgrounds to really help us go forward in STEM. So yeah, this is something I'm really passionate about. I do a lot of projects with this. In North Dakota, I'm hoping to do a documentary about our mission, and then I'm going to premiere it at some local middle schools, high schools in my neighborhood. And so this is something I'm really passionate about. I also do some STEM camps and lots of other outreach programs. So.
Now, it's very impressive that you all realize how much outreach and education for the next generation is important to sustaining what we're all trying to do. So I appreciate that, and it makes me feel proud that we're on the right path. Speaking of that, this is kind of a free-for-all. You don't have to go down the line, but I just want to hear a couple of things about how ASF has impacted you. I know there is a financial part of it, but I don't think that's all of it anymore. But what's been the most impactful part of ASF for you? Anyone?
So I'll say the cliche thing that I feel like a lot of people are going to say, but it really is the people that you see up here, the people that have helped us around the room. I know speaking from the 2021 class, we have a group chat that all of us are a part of, and we're still pretty active in. We come from all different walks of life, all aspects of life. We're in different stages, whether you're going to industry, grad school, still in undergrad, whatever it may be. There's always someone in our group that has done something that you're trying to do. And it's nice to have that support group that you can reach out to and just ask, like, how do I do this? How do I apply for grad school? I've never applied to grad school until recently, but I was reaching out to people in the group, people like Caroline, Lisa, just everybody. And it truly is impactful to have that type of support group, because that just instills confidence in you. And you had said that the money isn't the main thing, but for me it actually did help a ton, because I actually worked pretty much through my entire undergrad. So being able to get the astronaut scholarship allowed me to take off during my senior year. So that was really impactful for me, especially. So
Good.
I will say that.
Yeah, same with me. I was able to focus on my research the last 2 years of my undergrad because of the scholarship. But yeah, off of what you said, basically, like, even though we're all in pretty different fields and do different research, the aerospace and space industry is still a relatively small world. And so these are the people that we work with for the rest of our lives, and probably will continue to see each other. So maintaining those connections has been really impactful.
So I think just to double down on what Terrell said, the community that we get out of this is unparalleled, and I probably will never find something like this ever again. We touched on this a bit in morning meetings, but a lot of us are part of other foundations or other scholarship programs or other awards that's it. you walk away with a piece of paper or a piece of glass, and that's it. And you walk away with that and a memory of it and nothing else. This, you walk away with a family. And that really can't be replaced by anything else. And then the other shared notion that I think a lot of us from the 2021 class have discussed, I can't speak for the other classes, but I imagine it's the same, is that for most of us, there's this deep-seated imposter syndrome that you're like, am I sure? We literally were talking about this before the lot of us came and sat in front of you. We're like, are we sure we should be here? Like, who said I should be sitting here? I'm 23. And so it's this constant conversation of like, am I good enough to do X, Y, Z thing? And then your community that you have built through the foundation is constantly backing you, being your cheerleader, saying you can do it, we've done it, it's hard, but you have all these people behind you encouraging you to do the thing. And it also is incredibly heartwarming because you're no longer living in this bubble of, well, I want to work really hard and I have this crazy goal that people are telling me is really hard, and am I sure I want to do it? Because now everyone's making me question it. Because you're surrounded by people that have equally as crazy goals. And apparently we now have an adventure race team sitting in front of you from what we planned during lunch. So it's this really great thing of cross encouragement and pulling you out of your bubble to remind you that you are where you belong to be, and all these other beautiful, heartwarming notes that you just probably I can never fully put into words.
Yeah, I think the great sense of community here is, I mean, rightfully so, been talked to death. But I also really want to highlight the really amazing mentorship opportunities that we get through ASF. I am also first in my family to go to college, hoping to be the first to get my PhD. And when I got my job offer from SpaceX, I didn't know how to read a contract ever. But my mentor, who has been phenomenal, a great resource, even if he can't make a good cocktail, Tony Antonelli, he was absolutely phenomenal. He's always there whenever I text any questions. Someone who's interested in becoming an astronaut myself, it's kind of a dream come true that I can annoy him from my cell phone whenever I want. Yeah, I think the mentorship through ASF has been bar none. Seriously, it's phenomenal, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity where I could just be like, hey, I want to be matched with an astronaut as my mentor. And ASF said, yeah, sure, why not?
Well, thank you all. Those were great comments, inspirational. Makes me wish I could have been an astronaut scholarship fellow. Maybe I would have done something with my life if I had. But I also wish you would have talked to my son before he went to college, because he had great grades on the SAT, great grades. I'm like, Alex, you could be anything you want. You could be a great engineer. And I've been signing all these pictures, follow your dreams, reach for the stars. He goes, Dad, I want to be an English major. I'm like, no! So I had to put my money where my writing had been, and he went to Rice and is an English major. But he screwed up when he came home his second year and said, I got so many AP credits, I could actually graduate in 3 years. I'm like, yes! Anyway, enough sidelines for me. Speaking of people telling you you're not good enough, imposter syndrome, I have Kurt telling me that all the time, so you're in good company. But thank you all so much for your time. I think, well, are there any questions? I didn't hear any heckling from the challenge out there. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so there's really big conversations around how exactly do we deliver food to astronauts on long duration missions. There's a lot of confounding factors that we have to consider, and one of the major ones is palatability. As a human being, do you want to eat this thing, or is it kind of gross and you already probably don't feel good because, by the way, you're getting bombarded by galactic cosmic radiation and you're probably a little sick. So around that realm, there's this major conversation around, oh, well, we can grow algae, and that's really great because it's really nutrient dense, and it pulls carbon dioxide really efficiently, and it can be used as radiation shielding to keep you away from those GCRs. But do we really want to be eating little algae blocks? Bigger conversation.
What kind of protein? Because you need protein
Yeah.
to survive, and carbohydrates, even fats. What do you
Yeah, so there's likely a hybrid solution here of preparing and growing the fresher greens and things of that notion that provide us the micronutrients that astronauts are typically deficient in: vitamin A, vitamin C, magnesium, that lead to other physiological detriments. Those will really improve those micronutrient deficiencies, acting as a physiological countermeasure for other problems. The hybrid solution in preparing and growing fresh food is also still sending the pre-packaged. We've dried it, it's stabilized, usually shelf stable for 2 to 3 years. So for a 2-year turnaround time Mars mission, that will definitely be a more hybridized solution if we're even implementing a bioregenerative system like that for even that short term, right? I'm thinking more along the lines of when we get a commercial space station up there, we're running it like we're running ISS, when there are people up there constantly using that as kind of an orbital analog in orbit is a interesting oxymoron, but using that as an example of how we can do it on a surface-based habitat. So long answer of it's probably a hybrid solution. We can still derive proteins and fats from plants, so it's not nearly as efficient, and again, the palatability factors for astronauts.
Sure.
Just first, as a longtime ASF supporter, I'm just very proud to be part of an organization that supports individuals like you. I know the future of the profession is in good hands, so thank you for that. I'm a member of the Apollo generation. I became an astronaut. I wish I had become an astronaut. I became an engineer because of Apollo. That sparked my interest in STEM. So I'd just like to get an idea of what was the spark that put you on a path to STEM careers.
So in 1986, I think it was, a movie called Top Gun came out, something like that.
Yes.
And I actually wrote about that in my application for ASF, how like different like movies and stuff. That was like my main like exposure to like engineering and like science outside of stuff. So I remember I think like Kurt mentioned that you were in Top Gun or whatever, and I was like, oh my gosh, full circle.
Were you born in '86?
No,
That's
no,
what I thought
no,
you were
no,
gonna-
no, no.
Thank you.
No, I got like a hand-me-down VHS or something. Yeah, that among like other things, just being like exposed to things that had already been done. It's just like, oh, there's a future in this, you know. Like when are we like going back to the moon? When are we going to Mars? And then that was kind of the start of stuff. So
I think from like maybe when I was 4 years old, my mom put a picture book in front of me of different celestial objects, galaxies, nebulae, something like that, and I was kind of hooked immediately. But the moment I really thought I could do it is when I read the work of Carl Sagan, who's a personal hero of mine. He actually went to the University of Chicago, and it's a big reason why I went there as well. And the way that he writes, not only just about space exploration and the search for extraterrestrial life, but just science as a way of thinking, kind of educated skepticism and how it informs and improves our lives, sometimes in ways that you don't even know were possible when you started out, really inspired me and made me believe that I could do it myself.
Hey, you did mention the south side of Chicago. I got to ask, are you a Sox fan or a Cubs fan?
Sox all the way, baby.
Go Cubbies, come on. Why do you think NASA has blue outfits? It's their Cubs fans. All right, sorry. Another question? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question that sort of ties off that. I have a scholar that's in the room right now, but I'm from Mississippi,
Uh-huh.
and math is optional after the 8th grade. I'm serious, really. And so part of the problem is structural. There's sort of an economic determinism, if you will, that if there isn't somebody to step forward, and I'm part of a project to identify Title IX schools to go in there and
I think that's a great question. We'll cue that. We'll go through real quick, just kind of like what inspired us, and we'll jump on that because that's good.
Okay, so I can almost double down on both of those things, which is great. I think as a kid, I always had this crazy curiosity about all things science related. My mother could probably tell you there was some experiment on our kitchen counter at all times. Thanks to her for letting me, at some point, leave them there. The thing that I think for me most fed into it, and I wish he was always in the room when I tell this story, is that I would bug the living daylights out of my dad, asking him questions. Why does this work this way? How does this work? Why is this thing? He's an electrical engineer by trade and works in the power plant industry. At 10 years old, I was begging him to take me to the power plants to see what was going on. 14 years old, I walk in the plant manager's office and I say, "Sir, why are you running at such a high opacity level today?" His jaw hit the floor. He's like, "Why is this 14-year-old girl walking in here telling me something that the EPA can sue me for?" So I just had this like crazy curiosity, and luckily my father was patient enough to foster that and answer my endless questions and feed into it. But I think it also, to the educational piece, came down to a lot of teachers for me. And I think a lot of astronaut scholars have a similar experience if at some point you were pulled and put into some level of advanced science and math class, if not from the very beginning. For me, that was from the second grade, because somebody saw something in me that said, you should probably be doing this a little bit more, and let's challenge you a little bit more. So from the educational piece, I think that's really important, but I also think it's equally as important to not leave the kids behind that don't show an immense aptitude to it, because that is important. And if we're automatically ruling kids out, we're marginalizing people that never have a shot to begin with. On the other hand, while we are all here for STEM advocacy, there's the other side of it of we can't necessarily eliminate arts. We can't necessarily say, don't go study English, don't go study art, don't go study music, because for me, growing up as a musician, that really influenced who I am. Being able to have that double influence and really have that discipline showed me a lot and made me a better, what has now become my engineering brain. I can't necessarily say the best path to advocating for math and science education is policy. I think what we can do is continue to advocate at a person-to-person level of a lot of efforts of what my colleagues have shared of we go and talk to these kids. We say, hey, this is this cool thing and you guys might like it too. And that might push them to keep taking those classes when they're not required later in life, because it may become that one-way street like you're talking about.
I'm also first-gen college. No one in my family was, a scientist or engineer or anything like that. But my parents were supportive of my curiosity. As far as like inspiration for going into engineering, I was always annoyed at myself because I would have ideas, I would want to do something, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have the materials to do it. So that forced myself to work towards putting myself into a position where I had the knowledge to build things, had the capital to do those things, and just be a creator, because that's what an engineer is. You create things that are in your mind. I think it's really rewarding. It's a really awesome opportunity because not many people get to do everything that they want to do, but you can kind of in that engineering scope. And as far as like the educational side of that, you have, we all got put in, the smart kid classes, right? All your friends are like, oh, you're over there in the other classes. But it is important for those people that are more curious. They should be allowed to be more curious and go learn those things. And then the other, students that, not everybody can be an engineer, not as far as like capacity, but should be, right? Not everybody can be, doctors or anything, because we have all these other things that need, skilled, qualified, smart people. Not everybody can do math, but they're highly intelligent, right? So intelligence is not being able to do one strict task. It's an ability to do what you do to a mastery level, right? So I think having that emphasis on do what you do with excellence and mastery, whether it's science, arts, whatever.
Yeah, everybody has raised excellent points, and I thank you for asking that question. It's quite shocking what you mentioned about math not being required, and I think for me personally, like, it ties into how I got into STEM in the first place. If I hadn't discovered in high school and later years in high school that I not only excelled but enjoyed math and chemistry and physics, I definitely would not be sitting here today. And so I think there's not a single answer on how we can combat this and how we can encourage the next generation, but I definitely think these sorts of policies are enacted at not the country level, but also at the local level as well. So I think also being not to advocate for political involvement, but necessarily, but also just to be active in voting all the way down to the school board level as well.
So to kind of hit both of your questions, I don't really have a single event that really got me into engineering. It was kind of the culmination of several events where NASA was just showing what they're capable of. A lot of people were inspired by NASA growing up, and that was me. Maybe a little bit later in life, but definitely that's what pushed me to become an engineer, because whenever I thought about, I want to be someone who changes the world one day, I always looked at NASA as that type of company. The people who worked at NASA were constantly changing the world, and that's always who I thought about when I thought about that. So that's what pushed me to be an engineer. Now, in terms of the question that you posed earlier, I think the biggest thing that we can do is really motivate the younger generation, show them the cool things that are out there in terms of engineering, and tell them that, hey, you can be a part of this. I know for me, I started school later in life, and it was because I wanted to. And it wasn't because someone was forcing me to do that. And because I did that, I feel like that contributed significantly to how, I guess, successful. I don't want to, I'm trying to be humble, but successful in school. And it's because I really wanted to be there. It wasn't because, my parents or somebody was forcing me to do it. And that passion and that drive to do something else because I wanted to is really what helped me out a ton. So I think that really what we need to do is show people what's out there, tell them, communicate as effectively as we can, and let them know that they can be a part of it. And I think that's really the major part of it.
So for the first question, I don't really have a single event either, but I would love to go to science museums, watch movies about dinosaurs or anything cool, really, go to planetariums. So that was kind of my spark for STEM, but I always was curious about the unknown, basically, and challenging myself in these difficult fields because STEM is very difficult. So I wanted to really go into that, challenge myself into these fields. And I was just always curious about really just, I would always want to be, like I mentioned, I'm the first science major in my family, so it was always kind of driving me to do what's not the norm, kind of what can I do that nobody else has done. I want to study these things that I don't know about. So that was kind of what drove me. And the second question, I really relate to that. Like I mentioned with these projects that I'm doing and my passion for STEM outreach and science communication. So I think that with my projects, if I can at least help one student in my local environment, that's enough for me. And that can help with a domino effect. Maybe they can grow up to be an engineer, they can help spread it. Maybe these programs I make can become more widespread and more common. But I do think that more widespread would require more policy, more large-scale initiatives for that. But I think that for us, a good first step is kind of these starting nonprofits, starting programs, just thinking of things like Khan Academy, things like that are very accessible. I think that there are a lot of creative solutions and a lot of different ways you can encourage kids to go into STEM. So I think there are a lot of different ways.
All right, well, thank you all. In true space program fashion, we have gone over schedule. I don't know if I can say over budget or not, but anyway, thank you all. It's been very informative. Really enjoyed spending time with you. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. By the way, you scholars flunked heckling, so you're going to have to study up on that. Good response.